Good afternoon, and welcome to Ohio Stadium, home of the Ohio State Buckeyes. They play football here, and tonight, Tony Gerdeman, they're going to be playing football against the Wisconsin Badgers. Should be a pretty interesting game. We are going to have lots of time to talk about it, and there's a lot to talk about. We will have Kevin Noon will join the show a little later. We will have we've got segments on X's and O's stuff from Ross Fulton. We've got a great recruiting segment from Alex Gleitman talking about some of the big-time visitors who are here. There is a five-star defensive end making his second visit in about a month, which is kind of intriguing, I think. And I'll have our usual behind-the-scenes segment. Kevin has a really interesting segment on conference expansion. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. But I guess and of course, forgot the thing that people are maybe most intrigued by, the availability report, which will come out at about 5 o'clock. So we can talk about that in about 45 minutes. But we've got plenty of stuff to talk about between now and then. I guess we can start, before we dive into the Ohio State game, let's talk about some of the other stuff we saw earlier today.
Sure.
Michigan played a team that actually fields a competitive team with 11 players. They did not play a 7-on-7 Kansas high school team. No. They did not play a team from the Washtenaw County Orphanage. They did not play a group of kids from a Make-A-Wish program. They actually had to play a football team today from Maryland. How did that go for Michigan?
Well, we got to see that Michigan has trouble stopping the run a little, has trouble getting to the quarterback a little. And they ended up winning by, 7? I think 7 or 8 was the final score. And this was the first time, as you said, they played a living, breathing opponent, and we got to see where some of the troubles may be. And also some of those troubles involved J.J. McCarthy. And I tweeted it during the game, like, he has only played against children at this point and has been able to do whatever he's wanted to do while also not being able to throw the ball a lot, being pulled out of the game. Like C.J. Stroud has thrown the ball a ton because Ryan Day wants him to get work. J.J. McCarthy has not thrown as much as he should have coming into this game, and he took a lot of time trying to make plays that weren't necessarily there, some that were, but also put the ball on the ground a couple of times, had a dropped interception. So a lot of what we saw from McCarthy last year, we saw from him today, and this is really his first time being able to play against a defense that has scholarship players essentially. And so you would think he's going to learn from this, but I think overall there were some exposures.
And it felt like you saw a little bit of the intriguing part of J.J. McCarthy that had everyone really wanting to see him. There was a play where he was running around the backfield for felt like 8 seconds and then took off running and was fast enough and elusive enough to pick up a first down. And it's like, wow, that's why you want to see him play. And then there was one where he tried to do the same thing and ended up just kind of like backpedaling and turned it, I think lost 15 yards. And I don't remember if they ended up overturning that on replay or not, but it was kind of like, well, the principle of the matter remains the same. You can't get yourself in that situation and, turn yourself into a 3rd and 25. So, there are reasons J.J. McCarthy played, and there are reasons J.J. McCarthy was not a complete given in Jim Harbaugh's mind, possibly, to play and to win that starting job. So we will talk much more about that game. Blake Corum had himself a day, by the way. Yeah. Holy smokes. We will talk much more about that game on the Monday episode of Buckeye Weekly, where we do our Michigan Monday show. And this week we will actually talk about Michigan. Last week we talked about Penn State because it's like we're not doing another one of these stupid shows about Michigan playing some JV high school team. We're going to – so this week Michigan Monday will be back. No more Penn State Pun Day. So Michigan Monday back Monday in the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed. Now, Clemson, Wake Forest. I guess. I mean, Clemson is still alive for the college football playoff. I think you came in feeling like, well, Clemson's defense is pretty good and Clemson's offense is kind of a question mark. And yet went to overtime, but then they gave up, 45 points or whatever it was, 38 in regulation. And, it feels like you watch Michigan, you watch Clemson, and it was kind of like, I don't know how many top 5 teams are. It feels like there's like maybe 3 top 5 teams in the country right now.
Who would you take between those two? Because I think I think the bias, I don't even know if it's bias, just the experience with Clemson gives them the edge. Like, they've been in the playoffs before, they've won it. They have that their blood is bluer when it comes to the playoffs and Michigan's, although, maize and blue. But I think I would still probably give Clemson the edge, but I don't know because, again, that Clemson offense is not very good. I was surprised they did as well as they did. DJ had some good throws. Surprised that Wake Forest was able to move the ball against that defensive line. And I think with either of these teams, Michigan or Clemson, if they are the number 4 team or number 3 team or whatever in the playoffs, you've got 3 other teams saying, please let me play those guys.
Yeah, it does feel a little like some of those old Oklahoma teams. And, I think one of the other teams that's in that conversation right now is USC, which is, oh boy, I don't know that USC's – we'll see how USC does in Corvallis tonight. That's another one where it's like it feels like you've got half a team. This is a very familiar Lincoln Riley feel where it's like, boy, they've got a great offense. How's the defense? Well, friends, let's talk more about that offense.
Offense, though.
Oh, boy. That offense, though, the Lincoln Riley story, coming soon. The run will end. The theater will close before the playoff semifinals is my expectation there. So, and one more thing going on right. Sorry. 2 more things. First thing, Brian Harsin. Holy Moses. Auburn, there is a long-running joke online that Auburn has a deity of their choice up in the sky shining down on them. And it was as apparent as it's ever been today where Missouri misses what would have been a game-winning chip shot field goal at the end of regulation. Auburn misses a field goal in the top half of the first in overtime and gets the benefit of a penalty and gets a second shot at it and kicks it. And then as Missouri's running in for what would have been the game-clinching touchdown in the bottom of the first half of overtime, guy reaches out with one hand, fumbles, and it was a foot away from being a game-ending career, stint-ending time for Brian Harsin at Auburn, and they survive and will presumably play another week.
We talk about these athletes that have eyes in their feet and they can know where the sidelines are. Like that Missouri player had eyes in his feet and didn't step out of bounds. But if he had, then maybe Missouri goes on to win that, and that play is dead before it's fumbled. And I know this is not the truth, Tom, but it sure feels like when players reach the ball out for the pylon, they fumble it as much as they don't. And, I know that's not true, but you're just putting the ball out there to you're asking for that when you do that. And, you want to score there, obviously. But I wonder if coaches will start being like, discretion being the better part of valor. Let's keep 2 hands on the ball when you're down there. And then, if we can't score on 4 attempts from the 3-inch line, we'll deal with it then.
Well, and then you can kick a field goal, which, sometimes doesn't work. See previous attempt at field goal for Missouri. But, reaching out for the pylon is okay. I would keep 2 hands on the ball and not try and one-hand it because that is asking for trouble. So, and last thing, boy, Michigan State might not be real good, huh? Minnesota 14, Michigan State nothing. If Ohio State wins tonight and Wisconsin has a Big Ten loss, it feels like it's starting to look a little like you might see Minnesota in Indianapolis in December. Maybe it's still very early, but this is the first time that Minnesota has kind of had the Michigan non-conference schedule, but and it's only the second quarter, but they have just completely run Michigan State off the field so far. I was not necessarily buying Minnesota. Now I'm a little Minnesota curious.
Weren't they a couple of point favorite in this one as well over the Spartans? It was like 1.5 or 2.5, something like that. And Minnesota, we know, is a very physical team. They've got a quarterback who Tanner Morgan has been there. I think, is he a 6th-year guy now at this point?
If it's either 6 or more.
Yeah, so they've got that offense doing what it does. I think Chris Outman-Bell was even out for this game, and they're still able to do this. They're starting their best receiver. And then, Michigan State, Peyton Thorne, I expected more from him this year. Kind of figured the running game would drop a little without Kenneth Walker III. But this is not good at home to be doing this, and it's not some sleepy noon game kick or anything like that. This is PJ Fleck and his sloganisms that Scott Frost does not care for. And, hey, you know what? One guy has a job. The other guy is busy counting his millions.
I'm not sure who's better off there, but
one guy's stuck in Minnesota, and the other guy is wherever he wants to be.
I suppose that is technically true. Oh, Kevin Warren at the game. I'm sure enjoying things.
His son, he is a Spartan dad.
Yes, he is.
Or was.
He is. Probably was. All right, so that's enough Big Ten talk. Let's talk a little, other Big Ten, but Michigan, Ohio State and Wisconsin, different Big Ten, more adjacent to us Big Ten. Ohio State comes in, and we'll go through the availability report at 5:00 when that comes out. There's been some rumors this week about guys on offense, guys on defense. We'll go through all that kind of stuff. But before we get into that, let's just kind of talk about the game in general. And Wisconsin is one of those teams where it's just like, I say Wisconsin football, and there's an image in your head right now, and it is a bunch of 330-pound white guys on the offensive line, a really good running back, a quarterback who's just sort of a game manager type, a couple wide receivers who are probably going to run some jet sweeps and not be huge threats downfield, a tight end who will pick up 3 annoying first downs through the course of the game, and a very disciplined defense that is not loaded with talent, but is a very well-coached, very disciplined defense that is not going to make a lot of mistakes. How much of that from the vision in your head from every Wisconsin team since 1993, how different is this team from that vision?
Not a lot, although the game manager thing with Graham Mertz, I think if he was more of a game manager and less of a blue chip arm type of guy where he'd be more careful with the ball and is like, I know I can't make that throw, whereas you've got a guy who thinks he can make the throw with receivers who can't necessarily get open like other schools do. So it's like that, even though you want a quarterback who can make all of the throws, kind of a dangerous combination when you've got guys that can't necessarily get open like you'd like them to, and a quarterback who thinks he can get the ball in there. It leads to interceptions and some bad plays. And I'm not saying they should have a less confident quarterback, but actually what I should say is they should have better receivers. And we're talking about a group of receivers. 2 of them have both had a 100-yard receiving day, but they're both still 170 yards receiving on the season and after 3 games. It's very odd, as we were talking about before the show.
And I do kind of like your idea. And Mertz only has 2 interceptions this year, so he's not just a turnover machine by any means. But there is a little more YOLO in him than there is in a typical Wisconsin quarterback. You go through the years, and it's just sort of like every Wisconsin quarterback is just Craig Krenzel with a slightly less talented surrounding cast. Mertz is the first Wisconsin quarterback, I think, possibly ever that Ohio, at least since the beginning of the recruiting era, that Ohio State has actively said, we would like that guy. And he has gone to Wisconsin. And, you can question the wisdom of that, but, Wisconsin is stealing quarterbacks from Ohio State. Ohio State is stealing offensive linemen from Wisconsin. Cats and dogs living together. It is quite, what a time to be alive, Tony. It does feel like Graham Mertz is, he could win the game for Wisconsin, but he could also lose the game for Wisconsin, because you look at the series history between these teams. Wisconsin has not beaten Ohio State since 2009, right? 2010 up in Madison. Yeah. That was a game where Wisconsin ran the opening kickoff back for a touchdown, and it was kind of like, oh, it's going to be one of those nights. And then it was. That was also the last time Wisconsin scored more than 30 points against Ohio State. Wisconsin is sort of very good at what Wisconsin does. That does real well against the Minnesotas and the Iowas and the Nebraskas of the world.
Big Ten West.
It does not translate quite as well against Ohio State. They have had running backs who have had big days, but it also feels like there's been a lot of times where Melvin Gordon comes in averaging 178 yards a game and ends up with 64.
Yeah, and they've had those games where they, 2013 when they put Bradley Roby on Jared Abderbaris, and everybody ripped Roby for that game, but he followed him all around, and he did that, and he sacrificed, playing a normal game so that they could focus so much on just stopping the run and the other threat that Wisconsin poses, and it worked. And that was one of those games where I don't even remember. See, all of these Wisconsin running backs, was that Monty Ball? Was that Melvin Gordon? Was that they all run together? I know it wasn't PJ Hill. It was not John Clay. It was not Ron Dane, but where I think it may have been Melvin Gordon or Monty Ball colliding with Ryan Shazier at the goal line. Like, there have been some hellacious line of scrimmage games, but you've seen Ohio State bow up and be able to handle the run. And I think a lot of that is because obviously you want to stop the run first. And if you stop Wisconsin's run, they can't make you pay for it over and over. They can make you pay for it a couple times a game like anybody can. throw deep and get open, get lucky, especially as we've seen against an Ohio State defense that has given up some plays. But if you can slow down this run and keep them to 2.5, 3 yards of carry, now you're asking them to do something they don't do, which is let the quarterback and the receivers, the pass catchers, beat you, and they will take that all game long. Graham Mertz and the receivers beat us.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, and that's asking them to do something way out of their comfort level, because that is not what Paul Chryst wants to do on offense. I think he is Paul Chryst is an offensive guy at heart. He is a former college quarterback, but he is not a former quarterback and offensive mind quite like Ryan Day is. Like their goals, they are both very successful college coaches. They've won a whole crap load of games as head coaches, but they go about offense very differently. And yeah, if this is a game, this feels like a game where if you tell me how many yards per carry Wisconsin gets, we do this a lot.
Yeah.
Give me one stat. How many yards per carry does Wisconsin have today? If it's under 5, this is probably going to go poorly for them.
Well, I was just thinking you probably got to make it 5.5 just to make it curious.
Yes.
Like, okay, now that's interesting. But if it's under 5, to me, that's a good day against a very talented running back, 2 very talented running backs, and Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi, who can break tackles, who can break big ones, and can really get going. And they really, Wisconsin has this way of getting momentum, and once any offensive line gets going, they gain confidence, they feel better, and they get more aggressive, and it's this self-fulfilling prophecy type of thing almost. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how they go about trying to stop that run, and because I think Jim Knowles wants to show everybody that he can do it with Tanner McAllister or that nickel, whether it's McAllister or not. Like, I think he really wants to show everybody, because when he came in, we were all like, yeah, but what are you going to do in Wisconsin? When you play in Wisconsin's running game, what are you going to do then? Because you can't go with 5 defensive backs, dude. I mean, come on. Do you even defensive coordinate, bro?
Do you even Big Ten, bro? Yeah, it is. This is, I think, a little bit of a storyline here, and just the overall storyline of toughness that has been a big thing. Yes, Minnesota up 17-0 on Michigan State now. I'm sure the Spartans are going to bounce right back here. The storyline of toughness all season has been a big one, and that has been a storyline since, frankly, the Oregon game last year, but certainly since the Michigan game last year. And toughness is a theme that Ryan Day has sort of harped on over the years, and the idea of tough love and all that kind of stuff. And they haven't necessarily walked that out on the field. That was one of the things where they came out against Notre Dame, and I think they wanted to prove, hey, we can be tough. We can stop what is a physical team that wants to run the ball, and they did. And now you've got Michigan, Wisconsin coming in, and that's a big physical team that wants to run the ball, and so that's another challenge there. So I think that's going to be interesting on that front. And if they can stop the run, I don't know that Wisconsin necessarily has a plan B, because we're going to talk about the Ohio State defensive backs in a minute, but the passing game for Wisconsin, they have not played. They played Washington State, which is they're like a somewhere between a decent to good Pac-12 team, but not this is not probably going to be a New Year's Six type of team out of Wazoo. So they played them, and they've played 2 other tomato cans, and their leading receiver in terms of yards per game is currently at 57.3 yards per game. 57.3. 2 guys in the 40s, and then after that, 15.7. Like there is not a consistent receiving threat here where that is a pick up a first down type of receiving game. That is not, if they can't run the ball, can they move the chains through the air? I don't know that I think that they can.
Who is their guy on 3rd and 8? Like, who? Exactly. It's a tight end. It's like there's no go-to guy there. And, you can say, well, that makes them more difficult to defend. None of those 3 guys, the 4 guys that he has running out there are easy to defend, Tom. And when you can defend, with the tight end with a linebacker and these receivers, another one with a safety, because they aren't the most dynamic receivers in the Big Ten. And this feels like as long as you can hold up against the run, this is an offense that Ohio State's defense the back end should be suited for. And there have been concerns about the back end, at least at corner, not the safety so much, but at corners. And so, like you can't say, like, I'm not thinking like, well, the corners are going to be fine, because they haven't been fine once this season. So there's an issue there. And so you have to assume more bad stuff will happen. But Wisconsin has to be able to do it consistently and over and over again. I just don't think they can. And that's without even talking about the pass rush.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
and there's some issues with the Wisconsin offensive line, possibly down a couple of starting tackles as well. So that if the Buckeyes aren't able to get two birds, like that would be a disappointment, I think, for Ohio State, especially when Wisconsin's passing game isn't necessarily like the spread quick thing. It's play action, it's take your time, and that should lead to some pressure, you would think.
Right, and if you don't have time to sit back in the pocket, they don't necessarily have the types of wide receivers who are the zip it out, get it out quick, get it to them in space, and make two guys miss and jet down the field. That's not really the type of receiver. It's a more possession receiver kind of offense. And
although you say that, and now let's watch what happens. You've put it out there, Tom.
I have put it out in the universe. Ohio State football, what could possibly go wrong? I think the other half of this conversation that we have to have, and we're going to continue this conversation at 5:00 when the availability report comes out, but we were at practice on Wednesday night, and Denzel Burke was not practicing. And so you would certainly assume he's not 100%. And corner is a position where depth is already a concern. So if you're playing with at least one of your corners, they have three healthy corners right now coming into the week: Denzel Burke, Cam Brown, J.K. Johnson, because that are not true freshmen.
Yeah.
Jordan Hancock has been banged up. Other guys are not 100% right now. We'll get to the availability report later, but beyond that, you've got those three guys, and then you're into true freshmen. And he doesn't. Jim Knowles doesn't necessarily want to put a third linebacker out there, but if you are down to two corners, two veteran corners, then what's the plan then? Because are those two guys playing every single snap? Are you at the point where you trust Jair Brown? Ryan Turner, one of the other true freshmen, just lost his black stripe this week, but he, against Toledo in a game where they scored 17 trillion points, he played 3 snaps. So they don't, he just lost his black stripe, and good for him, and that's wonderful. But they don't, he's clearly not in the circle of trust right now. So what do you do if you are down to 2 healthy corners?
Well, and they've been playing 3 the last couple of, almost all season. J.K. Johnson has been playing quite a bit, certainly the last 2 weeks, 50 snaps, 45 snaps, things like that. And so this is a Wisconsin offense that the receivers may not be that great, but corners are still going to have to help out in run support. And it's a very physical game. And we've talked to players over the years, and it's always a Wisconsin game where they feel the sorest after. And so this is one where you might want to play more than just 2 corners, not necessarily for coverage, the coverage aspect, but just to give them a break from the run defense that they've had to do. Now, maybe they don't get as involved if stuff is kept between the tackles, and they're used more as just make sure Braylon Allen doesn't bounce it out, as insurance type of thing. But yeah, I mean, the one good thing you have is Wisconsin is going to try to burn the clock. Mm-hmm. So it's not like these corners, if there's just a couple, it's not like they're going to be playing 80 snaps.
Right.
They're probably 60 maybe, and 65, and that's about what that's pretty normal. The wear and tear, I think, is going to be a concern that they will monitor. But yeah, do you want to go with, is Jair Brown ready, something like that? And so I think there's going to be a lot of monitoring, just the contact, the tackles involved, and just getting feedback from the players on how they feel.
And the change in defensive philosophy in terms of what they're looking for out of that defensive front, and going to more of a spill and kill look this year, that feels like a lot of the success there is going to be, number one, the disruption they can get from those defensive linemen. If Wisconsin is missing offensive linemen, which is a real possibility, can you get JT Tuimoloau out, Jack Sawyer, get some of those guys? Mike Hall's been someone who didn't play last week. Is he going to be back this week? you've got guys like that who could be coming off of the edge. Zach Harrison has been very active. Those are people who might be able to disrupt the running game a lot. But if they can't, or if they can only to the spill and kill degree, then a lot of this is on Tommy Eichenberg, so Cody Simon, Steele Chambers. If you get Braylon Allen out in space, you got to get him to the ground, because if he's running, if you get him down on the ground and he's gaining 4 yards, Ohio State will do that all night long and be 100% fine with it.
Yeah, and the other thing with Braylon Allen, he's bigger than Steele Chambers. He's as big as as Tommy Eichenberg and Cody Simon, 6'2", 235. So even, I think the winner of the contact, like when they meet up when the linebackers meet up with Braylon Allen, which way are they going? And if they don't go anywhere, that's a win for Ohio State as well. They go backwards. If Braylon Allen goes backwards, obviously that's a win as well. But how far after contact does Braylon Allen get? Is it 3 yards? Is it 4 yards? Is it something like that where, that would be a significant amount of yards after contact that make the next play shorter. It allows Graham Mertz to, a 2nd and 3 instead of a 2nd and 7, where you can do what you want, and keep them ahead of schedule, and just keep the Ohio State defense from knowing exactly what to expect. And when they do know what they can expect, then obviously Jim Knowles can scheme for it. But when you don't necessarily know what can happen, then you got to be a little passive, or you got to be even more aggressive. And then when you are more aggressive, that leaves things open on the back end. So, we're talking about this line of scrimmage battle, but if the corners and the safeties hold up and don't give up anything, like any big plays, that's another significant move and result to where you think, well, how is Wisconsin going to do this if they don't have some big plays in the passing game?
Yeah, you get the balance between passive and aggressive is going to be a difficult one. You never want to be passive aggressive. We don't know anyone like that, do we, Tony? Looks like we have a super chat.
Contributor to the Hugh, 1-pointer, Dallin Hayden outrushes Braylon Allen.
Okay, 1-pointer from contributor to the Hugh for bold predictions. Dallin Hayden outrushes Braylon Allen. Is that a 2-pointer?
I think that's a 2-pointer.
That might be a 2-pointer.
A 1-pointer that I went with is Travion Henderson outrushing Braylon Allen, because you would not give me Mayan Williams outrushing him. So I pulled a fast one and actually got the guy that I wanted.
Speaking of the guy that I wanted, the guy I want to hear from right now is Kevin Noon. He filed a story for us this week on conference realignment, and there has been some news coming out of Pac-12 country this week. From some pretty reliable sources on some future directions that things might be headed out there. So let's hear from Kevin on conference realignment.
Thanks. No time for cooking a brisket today. We've got Buckeye football this evening, and really excited. So, I'll just have to pretend that I've had an opportunity to go out and do a brisket or a slab of ribs. But, as we were having our planning meetings and trying to figure out what we were going to do on today's pregame show, we always have our X's and O's segment. We always have our recruiting segment. Tom does a fantastic job with the behind the scenes. And then there was me. What was I left with? With it being a night game, I really can't talk about games that are going to happen this weekend, as many of them have already happened by the time I've taped this. So it left me with a big, wide open idea of what I could talk about. And, I'm going to talk a little bit about Big Ten expansion right now. And not that there's necessarily any new news when it comes to Notre Dame, or not that there's any new news about teams beyond the 16 come 2024. But I've been asked by a lot of people questions about UCLA and what's going on there. And the governor of California and the Pac-12 commissioner have certainly tried to put the brakes on this move, as they should try to, because this certainly is not good for the Pac-12 if they lose the Los Angeles market. They're trying to get the politicians involved because of UCLA being part of the University of California system. But, there were comments that came out, and I read it from a couple of people. The person that I remember writing it was Dennis Dodd of CBS, but there probably were others. So if I'm not crediting the right person, I apologize. But the Pac-12 commissioner came out and said that UCLA would probably just break even with all of its newfound money because of travel costs and everything else, which is just an act of a desperate person at this point, trying to keep his conference together. Because if the Pac-12 falls apart, if the Big Ten goes in and pulls 2-3 more teams from the Pac-12, what's left? What is the Pac-12 going to do at this point? San Diego State isn't going to get it done. Sorry, Eric Winter, a good friend of mine who is a SDSU alum. So what are they going to do at this point? I mean, it comes into merging or something along those lines with another conference. They certainly would not have a Power 5 designation unless they sat there and merged with maybe the Big 12. And even at that point, then you would be Power 4. But as we see ourselves moving quicker and quicker toward the 12-team playoff, which, may not happen until after this current contract is done in a couple years, could happen sooner, even though there are a lot of logistical nightmares. I think that the demise of a power conference could be gas. It could be an accelerant toward this happening, even though we know expansion doesn't happen immediately. There's not been a case of where it's like, okay, this is happening, see you in a week, see you in a month, see you in 10 months. It's a 3-year process. It's a 4-year process. It takes a long time to unfurl entanglements and things of that nature. I mean, the Big Ten has already taken schedules off the board beyond the 22 season, but I don't see an accelerated path to SC and UCLA maybe getting into the Big Ten. But I do think that there's a lot of chaos that is still waiting in the wings and not necessarily that far off. Now, people will be like, well, how far off is not far off? Well, I'm not talking a month. I'm not talking 2 months. I mean, then again, it could happen, but I think we're still looking 12 months out, 10 months out, 12 months out for the next dominoes to fall. In an article, again, kind of going off of the talk of the Pac-12 commissioner saying that, if UCLA doesn't go, that the Big Ten could counter and move with either Stanford or Oregon or Washington, who, Stanford is private and doesn't, everybody tries to link them to Cal, but there's no connection there other than geography and incredible academics. But, Cal is part of the UC, the University of California system. Washington and Oregon each could have their own entanglements in their own states, because we've always talked about what happens, to Wazoo or what happens to Oregon State, just like we talked about what happens to Oklahoma State if Oklahoma moves. Well, lo and behold, Oklahoma's moving and Oklahoma State is still where it is. So a lot of interesting things happening there. Not necessarily a lot of news, but still stuff to keep on your radar, because now as we're in the thick of the Big Ten season, focused on the 2022 season, the expansion talk has slowed down, but don't let it fall off your radar, folks. Don't let it fall off your radar, because things are still percolating in the background. Conferences are playing defense. Conferences are playing offense. We haven't heard anything from Kevin Warren in a while on this. Things are happening. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Kevin. We always appreciate
That's great.
more than anything in the world, I'd say. But Tony, I'm not losing to Middle Tennessee State right now. Are you?
No, I am not. But yes, the U 24-3 to Middle Tennessee State. One of the better teams in the state of Tennessee, at least in the middle portion of the state.
One of the teams in Tennessee, absolutely. So yeah, the Texas A&M hangover effect, very famously.
I don't think that's a thing.
Not
Tom.
a thing. No. Okay.
No.
So we've got a bunch more we're going to be talking about here, but let's just give people a quick update. We are about 10 minutes away from the availability report, which I know is always kind of one of the things people are waiting for here more than anything else. We're going to have a segment from Ross Fulton coming up in just a couple minutes, doing a little bit of a schematic deep dive on the X's and O's. But before we get to that, I did want to talk a little bit about the Ohio State offense. We just talked a lot about the defense. I think right now things are kind of clicking for the Ohio State offense. They have looked a little ragged at times, and you can chalk certainly some of that up to the absence of Jackson Smith-Njigba for several weeks already. But last week against Toledo, and it remains to be seen exactly how good Toledo's defense is. But that Ohio State made Toledo, which is not UConn or Hawaii or Colorado State. made them look a lot like UConn or Colorado State or Hawaii, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Wisconsin is a little bit of a different challenge where the skill level isn't necessarily, they don't have the lockdown first round future top 5 NFL draft pick corners that necessarily would be able to match up with a Marvin Harrison Jr. or someone like that. But it is a very disciplined, solid, well-coached defense with a solid scheme. What is a reasonable expectation for Ohio State? They're not scoring 77 points tonight. So what is a reasonable expectation for Ohio State fans going into this game? What does a successful night look like to you?
Well, a successful night for a Ryan Day offense is in the 30s because that's when they win. An unsuccessful night is in the 20s because that's when they lose. So I think if you get into the 30s against this Wisconsin defense, you take that. And again, I think this is going to be a shortened game. I set my DVRs like, do I really need to go beyond 3.5 hours? I don't, but just to be safe, I will. I figure 3.5 hours would be plenty. Although you never know, is this like a 7:45 kickoff instead of a 7:30 type of thing? But this defense for Wisconsin, Nick Herbig, their pass rushing outside linebackers, probably their best player. And if you neutralize him, then you think you're going to have a good chance. And you saw the impact that Jackson Smith and Jigba had last week without even getting the ball. He was being bracketed at times, which leaves single coverage for everybody else. And that's why you have Emeka Egbuka with 100 yards receiving, Marvin Harrison with 100 yards receiving, Garrett Stover with 83 yards receiving in the first half. So he impacts everybody. And but he wasn't out there the entire time, and the offense was still moving. So you figure, like, they missed him badly that first week. They've kind of been able to live without him and figure it out. And while that doesn't necessarily help in terms of, Emeka does not get double covered, stuff like that. But you've got to be able to beat your guy, and they're able to now. They're doing that well. And so the offense has grown. And again, I keep saying they did this last week with Travion Henderson playing one series. Like, arguably your best back only playing one series, and you're rushing for over 226 yards. I can't remember the exact number, Tom, but it was over 226 yards.
No one cares. Wisconsin as a defense has been solid, and they have not faced anyone of, and any offense is the caliber of Ohio State's offense. This is, the Washington State offense they faced. This was not a Mike Leach air raid Washington State offense. Given up 2.7 yards per rush, 6.2 yards per pass. Those are both solid numbers. And now we're going to go for a quick super chat.
Contributor to the Q back again. What is your guess? Does Travion Henderson play? Also, is there a timeline on Cam Babb?
Okay,
In 8
well,
minutes.
yeah, ask us again in 8 minutes. The question is the status of Travion Henderson. We'll have the availability report at the top of the hour. And Cam Babb.
Now,
do we have a timeline on Cam Babb? It feels like we have not heard anything. It was kind of described as not season ending, and that was kind of about the timeline that we got. So you're now kind of pushing halfway through the season. I mean, they've played 3 games. This is the 4th game, which after tonight, boy, the regular season is a third of the way over, which doesn't seem possible. So my guess would be, and this is just a guess, but my guess is Cam Babb by the end of October, maybe, but that's just a guess.
Because you also got a bye week in there to provide another week. So that's kind of what I'm thinking as well, that they said a few weeks and really wanting to be as cautious as possible with him because you want him to play. Like, not even necessarily for the Buckeyes. Yes, you want him to be able to play for the Buckeyes, but you want him to be able to play for himself and just get out there. And so you don't want to get him out there before he's, 101%. Like, beyond that, like, be 100% for 2 weeks. That sort of thing where it's like, back in the COVID year, like, yeah, you're fine now, but we still need you to sit out another 10 days.
And he's someone who has not been out there for so long. At this point, there is a little bit of a ramp up period. So you're not necessarily going to just immediately be throwing him in the fourth quarter if you're on the road at Penn State and it's a close game. So you maybe try and look at what week would he have an opportunity to play in a lower leverage spot. If it's me, I'm looking at, can you bring him back against Rutgers? Can you bring him back against potentially like an Indiana where they might be, you're more likely to have 30-point lead than you are against maybe an Iowa, for example. So that may be something that figures in there as well. We will get to that availability report at the top of the hour. But just to finish my thought earlier, 2.7 yards per rush against Wisconsin, 6.2 yards per pass. Both of those numbers seem like they're going to go up by 2.5, 3 yards at least. And you know, I think it's real possibility it's like 3 yards a rush, you know, get into the 5.5 yard kind of range on the ground for Ohio State. And, you know, I mean, Ohio State has been, yards per pass has been like 12,
Right.
13. I don't know you're going to do that tonight, but, you know, if they're efficient enough to be in that, you know, 9-10 range, that's probably plenty to win this game.
Yeah, and you wonder how many home runs they hit to pad those stats, or if it's just one home run that pads it, then that's a bad thing. But if they can continue to just be consistent, really, that's really been a strength for Ryan Williams and Travion Henderson this year, is just what Ryan Day wanted at the outset of the season. Make the 3-yarders 5-yarders, make the 5-yarders 7-yarders, just get a little bit more out and stay ahead of the sticks, and they have. And Ryan Williams has been fantastic with that and very difficult to tackle. I think Travion Henderson last week getting just that one series, but running tough on his 4 carries. They're doing exactly what Ryan Day wants, and now they're doing it against – I'm still really interested to see how Wisconsin handles this defense, because you do need to stop the run, but you do need to stop the pass. And so how do you do that? Kevin, Super Chat.
Yes, contributor to the Hue. What does Michigan winning by 7 mean?
Well, Michigan winning only by 7. We talked about this kind of off the top of the show as Michigan State gives up a brutal first down. Oh, boy. Not a great day for NF Tuck futures. Michigan winning only by 7 against Maryland is
At home.
At home. I was a little surprised. I mean, they were able to run the ball. Blake Corum had a huge day, 246 yards or 43 yards or something like that. We saw out of J.J. McCarthy both the good and the bad of J.J. McCarthy. You saw the you know, incredible playmaking ability, you know, the make you miss on the ground, the strong arm. You saw that at times. And you also saw the young guy who tries to do too much. I think we saw for the first time, you know, Michigan getting pushed a little bit, and they passed the test. And you don't want to, I don't think you ever want to go too overboard and go, look at that. They only beat an unranked team by 7 at home. And so therefore they're, you know, they should only be ranked 20th. I don't, you know, I think you have to sort of appreciate the fact that they have not played a team that has stressed them at all to this point of the season.
Yeah.
So
This is game 1 for them.
Mm-hmm.
This is a season opener, in my opinion, for them. And so you're going to get better from week 1 to week 2. And defensively, they need to. But again, it's the first game essentially of the season, and I think they will. But it was concerning to see Maryland be able to run the ball like they did. And, you know, Michigan got a gift right off the bat with the kickoff off of the face. They got another gift from the refs when the dropped an interception was not reviewed. So that was two huge plays there that ended up in a one-score game, and you wonder if Maryland has either of those back, what happens?
Yeah, the looming. We are 2 minutes away from the availability report, by the way. So we'll do that next, and we will save the Ross Fulton X's and O's preview and the Alex Kleitman recruiting preview for a little later on in the show. You know, that the whole game, it felt like that opening kickoff, that one muff on the opening kickoff, just sort of hung over the whole game, because there was a point where it was 13-10 or something like that in the second quarter. And it was like, boy, you think you just could take that one play back.
Yeah.
You know, it was a lot like the DeMario McCall muff of the kickoff right before halftime in the 2018 Ohio State-Michigan game, where, you know, they scored 2 touchdowns in 13 seconds or something like that. And Ohio State had completely dominated the first half. And then they went into halftime and it was like a 1-point game. And it's like, boy, if you just take that one muff back, boy, that really changes the whole conversation around the game. You get the sense Michigan probably wins anyway. I feel like Michigan probably, you know,
That's what they do.
Michigan is the better team.
Yeah.
But, you know, if Michigan plays anything like that against Ohio State or Penn State, that's not going to go well for them. I don't expect them to play like that against Ohio State.
It makes me wonder what happens next week. Is next week at Iowa?
Maybe.
So I think they're at Iowa next week. And not that I'm Iowa's offense, but the offense does against the Hawkeyes defense.
All right, so we are just
Is the
about to
ball
hit
dropping?
we are just about to hit the 5 o'clock hour. All right, 5 o'clock, Tony. Tony, let's play a little choose your own adventure with the availability report today. Do you want to start on offense or defense?
Well, let's start on offense because that's where the biggest name is.
Tony, do you want to start with the good news? Turn to page 13. To start with the bad news, turn to page 47.
Yeah, let's start with
Go ahead.
Page 47. Jackson Smith-Njigba is out for the game. Not a huge surprise. It's certainly a disappointing development based on the fact that he played last week. But the thing is, if he played last week, should he have? And we said it. I said at the time, yes, he should in order to get ready for this game and shake off some rust. But to go, but sounds like maybe a little bit of a setback, maybe this week in practice or in the game itself.
Yeah, and the red flag to me kind of went up because we were supposed to talk to him on Wednesday after practice, and then he wasn't there, and we were supposed to talk to Mitch Rossi too, and we were told Mitch Rossi had class, and then there was no explanation for Jackson Smith-Njigba, and it was like, that seems probably not like a tremendous sign.
Initially, it was a good sign because he was scheduled to talk.
Yes.
And then it's like, well, let's see if he shows up.
Yes.
And he didn't. Then
Yes. On the positive side for Ohio State, there was some question about Trevion Henderson after last week. He's fine. He is not. There's no one listed as a game time decision.
He's not listed.
He's not listed. Yes, he is not.
Don't say he's fine.
Well,
we've seen before.
We are being told officially that he is fine. We'll see how that shakes out.
I hope he's fine. He's one of my bold predictions.
Other guys on offense who are not going to be playing today, Evan Pryor, obviously out for the season. Tight end Joe Royer, he missed last week. Cam Babb, who we were asked about earlier. All those guys are all out along with Jackson Smith-Njigba. So, this becomes the Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka kind of show on offense.
Fleming.
Julian Fleming there's another good piece of news.
Yeah.
Yes, this is like jazz. You got to look at the notes that they don't play on the availability report, and Julian Fleming is not on the availability report. So, he had a tremendous catch in the corner of the end zone last week. So you still have three really good receivers there, and Jaden Ballard is sort of working his way into that conversation as well. But there is still plenty of receiver talent for Ohio State, even without Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Yeah, I think you'll see Fleming out wide at Z, and obviously Harrison at X, and then Emeka moves inside again and plays at H and catches like 11 balls for 130 yards, something like that, where he's going to be a focal point of the offense like every slot receiver in this offense is.
So on the defensive side of the ball, the only defensive lineman who is out is freshman Amari Abor. He was out last week as well, so not a big surprise there. Everyone else on the defensive line, the scholarship guys are healthy.
Might know Mike Hall listed, so Mike Hall looks like he's good to go. It's a huge thing if he can go.
Yeah, and again, we have seen guys not show up on the report and then not play, but
like last week with Mike Hall and Tanner McAllister and Josh Proctor.
With Mike Hall and Tanner McAllister and Josh Proctor. So either good news or bad news. None of those guys who missed last week after not being in the availability report are on the availability report again this week. So that's either good news or bad news, depending on how you want to look at it. So let's talk about the corners, Tony.
Yeah.
All week we were talking about Denzel Burke, and will Denzel Burke play? And Denzel Burke didn't practice on Wednesday, and oh boy, is that a big concern. Great news, Denzel Burke is playing. Tony, there's also some not so great news for Ohio State at corner.
Yeah, starting quarterback Cam Brown is unavailable. He is out. That was a bit of a surprise when we found that out, as he was not the guy you were expecting to be missing time, although that's part of his career at this point is missing time. So when he does miss, it's not a super surprise anymore, honestly. But yeah, it's unfortunate for him. And now it makes things very interesting with that cornerback depth because, as you said, no Brown. What is up with Denzel Burke? How much does he play? We will see J.K. Johnson starting, I'm going to assume. And how does he hold up? And is that third quarter, is it Jair Brown or is it maybe Cam Martinez? Like, who do they feel better about? And I don't expect there to be rotation unless somebody gets hurt and they have to throw one of the freshmen in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're at this point, you just assume that, the good news is, first of all, Wisconsin is not going to spread you out. They are not a go four wide type of team. So, if this was going to happen during a week, this is not a terrible week for it to happen for Ohio State. But, Denzel Burke, who, again, was not 100% during the course of the week, he's one of the guys you're relying on this week, J.K. Johnson, who has been earning more time in the rotation. He's going to be probably the other starter out there. No Jordan Hancock again this week, no Cam Brown. So then you're at the point where you're down to, true freshman Jair Brown, who played a decent amount last week, but it was not first half minutes. It was second half minutes. And then, like you said, Cam Brown, is there someone else that they're going to put in there? It is, that is a, I think that has to be a concern for Ohio State. The fact that it's this particular opponent maybe mitigates that a little bit, but I think that, I think you have to go into this concerned. Does this change to you what you're expecting, outcome wise or score? What, does this change in your mind, your predicted score for Wisconsin today?
No, not really, because I think it still comes down to what happens up front. And I think J.K. Johnson is good enough to start at Ohio State. Mm-hmm. So you still got two of your top three guys. And I think as long as you have two of them, then things are fine. And, that, as I said, the next guy up would be Jair Brown, I'm going to assume. And he was strong in the spring, strong in fall camp, and really came on when he had an opportunity and has played with the ones. Now, I'm sure they don't want to go to him if they don't have to, but this is the situation with the depth corner. So you're going to have to do what you have to do. But, and again, do you have some substitution in there to keep guys fresh so that you don't have to play the freshmen as much as you would if somebody gets tired or hurt? I think you probably just try to avoid playing the freshmen as much as you can, and just this is Big Ten football. You've got to go. You've got to be ready. You're going to have to play through it.
Yeah, and this is I guess a one positive sign or element of this for Ohio State is that if Wisconsin is kind of trying to manage the clock and keep hang on to the ball, you're not playing Tennessee where they're going to be snapping the ball 8 seconds after this after the the end of the last play. It's going to be a little more deliberate, so that lowers the number of snaps, gives you a little more time to recover between snaps as well. So that's I think a positive sign. I'm going to run just through the whole list real quick. You've heard it, but you haven't heard it in alphabetical order, so this will be new to you. Defensive end Mario Bohr, wide receiver Cam Babb, cornerback Cam Brown, cornerback Jordan Hancock, linebacker Mitchell Melton, linebacker Taraji Mitchell, defensive tackle Zach Prater, running back Evan Pryor, tight end Joe Royer, and wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigbo, all out tonight. Everyone else who whose name I did not say is presumably available and ready to go. And you would sort of assume that you're not going to have people held out in a discretionary way, right, like you saw a lot. They held out Josh Proctor and Tanner McAllister last week, and it sounded like that was extremely discretionary. Mike Hall might have been a fairly discretionary holdout last week. Toledo and Wisconsin are different challenges, so you're probably, the discretionary sit-outs are probably not happening this week.
Yeah, it feels like if you sat out last week, it was so that you could play in this game and be ready for it. And really, going to be presumptuous and assume the people not on the list are going to play. Getting Mike Hall back is the biggest news of the week, in my opinion. And it's bigger news not having Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I've talked about the gravity that Jackson has with the defense. Mike Hall has his own gravity, not just because he's like a really big dude. He's able to hold up the line and get into the backfield and just disrupt things. And I think if you can disrupt Graham Mertz, he will turn the ball over. And he hasn't gone crazy with interceptions yet, but he's not afraid to throw the ball to the defense, and he's not afraid to just kind of throw it up for grabs at times. And so if you can get him in there and if the offensive tackles are not healthy, now you're talking about the inside pass rush, the outside pass rush, and it makes the running game all the more important. And you can almost take some gambles now because you sense maybe some weakness and worry, and then you just go attack that weakness and worry.
So we are now at the point in the program. This is not just a big game for Ohio State. This is also a big night for the future of Ohio State. There are some big-time recruits in town, including a 5-star defensive end who's making his second trip to Ohio State in the month of September. That's pretty intriguing because he's not someone who people had necessarily penciled in to go to Ohio State or with Ohio State as the favorite. So that's that's a pretty intriguing visitor tonight. But there is a long list. There's a lot to talk about on the recruiting front. And rather than listen to us talk about recruiting, let's bring in someone who knows what he's talking about. That person is Alex Lightman. He is one of Buckeye Huddle's recruiting analysts, along with our good buddy Mark Givler. Alex will have a full rundown on kind of some of the recruits that we're going to be watching for tonight. We'll have coverage, of course, after the game and throughout the weekend. Alex always does a great job following up with the guys and getting some insight and analysis on, everyone had a great weekend, but what does it really mean? Alex is one of the best at that, and you can find his work at BuckeyeHuddle.com, but you can also hear from him right now.
Thanks, guys. And I feel like I say this every week, but it really is another exciting weekend of Ohio State football. Another primetime game, the third of the season. Ohio State opening up Big Ten play against the Wisconsin Badgers. While the Badgers come in not ranked because of their loss against Washington State a couple of weeks back, they're still Wisconsin, and they're still probably maybe Minnesota, but outside of Minnesota, I think a lot of people still expect Wisconsin to potentially win the West, if not be in contention to win the West. So this could be a preview of the Big Ten championship game in early December. But, when it comes to Ohio State's recruiting efforts, this is just another big opportunity to host a number of prospects. Obviously, Wisconsin, start a big play, exciting opponent, exciting time. A night game allows some of those out-of-staters to make it in if they played Friday night. Even some people who play earlier on Saturday elsewhere are able to make it to Ohio Stadium in time for the 7:30, really closer to 7:45 kickoff. And the Buckeyes are set to host a large recruiting list, probably number 2 so far this season to Notre Dame, just to talk about some of the big visitors that are expected on campus. We have a lot of commits in the 2023 class, all 4 wide receiver commits: Noah Rogers, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, and Bryson Rogers, all 4 guys coming from out of state. They'll be on campus. Offensive linemen from the state of Ohio, Joshua Padilla and Luke Montgomery, will be on hand to take this one in. Defensive lineman Will Smith Jr. practically lives in the horseshoe, so he'll be there. And then rounding it out, linebacker Arvell Reese from Cleveland Glenville, as well as Malik Hartford from down in the Cincinnati area, Lakota West, will be on hand. And, getting those guys on campus, it's always great to just build the camaraderie in the class, solidify their standing with Ohio State, but also have them serve as recruiters to some extent for those non-committed guys in both the 23 and 24 classes. Speaking of that, uncommitted guys for 2023, the staff, obviously outside of their game prep, will be able to focus as they have just 2 uncommitted prospects on campus. One, Caden McDonald, defensive tackle from the state of Georgia, on his official visit to Ohio State. Buckeyes, had a great visit last November with him. He really hasn't been back to campus since. So getting him on campus is a big step for Ohio State in their pursuit and attempts to land the big-time defensive tackle out of the Peach State. Oklahoma, Clemson, Florida, and Michigan are the top competition for McDonald, but Ohio State's going to give their best crack this weekend, and we'll see how that visit goes, and we'll keep you posted on BuckeyeHuddle.com in the week to come to talk about their chances in landing the 4-star defensive tackle. Maybe the biggest news of the weekend is that 5-star defensive end, Keeley out of Berkeley Prep in the Tampa Bay area, a top 10 player in the class. He is making a return visit to campus just 3 weeks after taking his official visit for the Notre Dame game. He's paying this one on his own dime, so it really can't be ignored. This is a huge opportunity for Ohio State. I think that they might be the leader over Alabama and Florida right now in this recruitment, and it kind of lets them cement that status, maybe even try to wrap this one up before an official visit to Alabama in the next couple of weeks happens. We'll see what comes out of this weekend, but that's really the number one storyline for Ohio State recruiting is the return of Keeley and what it means as far as their prospects of landing the top 10 prospect in America at a position of need. To wrap things up, some underclassmen will also be on campus. Indiana natives, wide receiver Mylan Graham, offensive lineman Ian Moore were also on hand for the Notre Dame game. Those are 2 guys who I have on commitment watch. I think Ohio State leads in both of their recruitments. There's no timeline. They both kind of said we'll make the decision whenever we feel it's right. Could that time be right after this game against Wisconsin? I think it's potential. So definitely keep it tuned into BuckeyeHuddle.com, and we'll keep you posted on everything from those guys. Just a couple other notable names to watch. Tight ends, Damarian Witten from Cleveland Glenville. Tight end Michael Smith from down in Georgia. They'll both be on campus. Offensive lineman Donovan Harbor. He was also at the Notre Dame game. It looks like it's a Badgers Ohio State battle for the Wisconsin native. He'll also be coming with 4-star running back teammate Corey Smith. So those are some big visitors. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, in-state defensive end Elias Rudolph from Cincinnati Taft will be on campus. I have the Buckeyes as the leader in his recruitment. Defensive tackle Justin Scott from Chicago, Ohio State offered about a month ago. So he's, a 5-star player right now, and getting him on campus is definitely a big first step in Ohio State's pursuit of the Windy City product. Moving on to linebacker Garrett Stover, making his second consecutive visit. He'll now be at 3 out of 4 of the Ohio State home games. I think it's kind of a matter of if, not when for him. Notre Dame will get a visit this year. He's giving them an opportunity, but I think Ohio State has a pretty sizable lead on the Irish right now. Finally, rounding things off, a few big-time defensive backs in the 2024 class. Bryce West from Cleveland Glenville, Ohio State's in great position there. Cam Frazier from Columbus, the KIP school. No offer yet. He has offers from Michigan. He has offers from Kentucky, a few other big-time Power 5 programs. So he's certainly a player to watch, and Ohio State's had a ton of dialogue with him. So bringing him in for a visit is something you can't ignore. And then a 5-star prospect out of the state of Florida, Charles Lester III, getting him on campus on his own dime is a huge step forward for Ohio State in pursuit of the big-time prospect. Rounding things out for the entire visitor list, you look at 2025 prospects. Bryce Underwood from Michigan might make it up. Running back Marquise Davis from Cleveland Heights. Offensive lineman Avery Gach from the state of Michigan. And Atlanta product Josiah Abdullah has an offer from Ohio State. Very close with Jonte Gilbert, who's the lone 2025 commit right now. This is a big one. He visited in the summer, so second visit on his own dime in just the span of a few months. And then closing things out, wide receiver you guys have heard a lot about. Mark covered him last weekend while he was down in Florida. Malachi Toney out of American Heritage, teammate of Mark Fletcher, of Brandon Innes. No offer from Ohio State just yet, but I think that one might be coming this weekend. So just another storyline to look at. There will be full coverage of recruit reactions, ADEX, skull sessions, what it means for Ohio State with a lot of these visitors and where they stand in the week to come. So keep it tuned in to BuckeyeHuddle.com and enjoy the game.
Hi there.
Hi, Kevin.
It's me, new Tom. Better Tom.
Better Tom 2.0, the Tom we all love, not the Tom we all hate, the Tom we tolerate.
Absolutely. So I'm here for the remainder of the pregame show, and I want to make sure to invite everybody to watch the postgame show. I posted the link once in the chat. I will do it at the very end as well. Right after the game ends, we'll have postgame analysis with Tony and Justin Whitlatch. We'll have Ryan Day postgame, CJ Stroud postgame, hopefully Paul Chris postgame, players, and then, of course, the never replicated, never, often imitated Tom and Tony post-game spectacular. Be a late night, so drink some coffee, maybe Irish it up a little bit. I don't know, whatever your pleasure is, but join us for the post-game show.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Regardless of how the game goes, there will be plenty to talk about. That's how it always is. So looking forward to that. Immediately after the game, almost immediately after the game, throwing up a post-game show is always fun. And, it's, as you said, never often imitated, never duplicated.
Something like that.
But we do it as well as we can, and I think people like it. So
rarely procrastinated.
Well, we can't procrastinate. It's set. As soon as the game is over, we have to pretty much within minutes at least. So.
Well, we've had a lot of fun in the chat for the first hour plus of the show. I was monitoring the chat. Janet has made a lot of new friends in here by saying that the injuries may be too much for Ohio State, and that Ohio State may be a 9-win team. Thinking Janet may be what we call a troll, but I'm not sure at this point. But everybody's taking care of that. At halftime, Middle Tennessee is up 24-10 on the U. We have Adam Baker asking who's out for tonight. So really quick, let me bring up that board again as we're here in the second hour. There are no game time decisions, but in alphabetical order: Omari Abor, Cam Babb, Cam Brown, Jordan Hancock, Mitchell Melton, Taraja Mitchell, Zach Prater, Evan Pryor,
Joe Royer, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. So that answers the questions there. A lot of internet speculation about JSN's status. He is listed as out. We don't know cause or severity or length of absence. But I think that there have been a lot of rumors floating out who have believed that this is some sort of long-term situation. I don't believe that to be the case.
Well, and CJ Stroud told us a couple weeks ago that hamstrings are difficult, alluding to what Jackson Smith-Njigba was going through at the time. And you hope this doesn't just become a season long. Sometimes he plays, sometimes he doesn't, type of thing. And that's what those leg injuries can do. And so you hope that's not what it is. What do you think who is the bigger absence for the Buckeyes in this game, Jackson Smith-Njigba or Cam Brown at corner?
Contributor of the Hugh, I'll get to your super chat here in a second after I answer Tony's question. I think it's Cam Brown, just because with Jackson Smith-Njigba, you still have Emeka Egbuka, you have Marvin Harrison Jr., you have Julian Fleming, you got Jaden Ballard. I mean, you've got Xavier Johnson. There's a lot more depth there, whereas at corner, they certainly are a lot. I mean, they only had 6 scholarship corners going into the season, and they're a little thin there right now. And even though we did not see the name of Denzel Burke on that list, I mean, there certainly were a lot of questions about how healthy he is. So, I mean, is he diminished? And I know that there are a lot of people who would be like, well, obviously he is. He's played terrible this year. But, I'm not going to get into that per se. But, if physically he's, not 100%, what does that mean?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. But do we want to hit that super chat?
Yeah, contributor to the Hugh just jumping in saying Janet needs to find a new comment section to troll. I mean, I hear you there.
Well, you know what? All Janet is saying is that Ohio State will win at least 9 games this year. And I think everybody would agree with that, right? And maybe a 9-win team can also be a 10-win team, can also be an 11-win team, can also be a 15-win team. Like 9 is baked into that 15 wins.
What are the chances that Janet is part of the post-game show?
Well, I mean, it's a late night, so who knows how long she's allowed to stay up. That it will be late, maybe beyond her bedtime. Who's to say? But also, it depends on how the outcome goes. If Ohio State loses, I bet.
Wow, yes, she'll stay up. But to quote the great Rocky Horror Picture Show, "Damn it, Janet! Damn it, Janet!"
Speaking of that, something I wanted to mention: halftime show here tonight is Grease, which is the best musical of the generation before me. The best musical of your generation, obviously, Wizard of Oz. What's your thought? I only wanted to throw that joke in there. That's all.
That it was all the setup for that, and there wasn't really. Been along here, of course. I swear to God, I just hate the internet here some days. But we'll just kind of continue on as I say, "Damn it, Tony," too, to go along with "Damn it, Janet." We may be switching to the
things
hot
are
spot
fine.
in a
Things
second.
are fine until Tom left.
He must have taken the internet with him, and he's hopefully getting down into position for some sort of arrival video. I've got a shot up from him, so we're just kind of keeping an eye there to see what we get. Media Shed saying it froze, so we need to do the joke again. I don't know which joke we missed. If it's the one about Wizard of Oz and being from my generation, no, maybe now the Wiz, on the other hand.
Well, that's that was not bad, but Wizard of Oz is better than the Wiz.
I'm just talking about timeliness of it. Let's go to a couple of comments that we have on that note. DK, the way Graham Mertz has regressed through his career, you'd think he was being coached by Jim Harbaugh.
Oh, see, now I don't think it's regression. I just think it's lack of progression. Now, regression from his first start, yes, where he's like 21 of 22. But I think he's been a bad quarterback and is maybe now an average quarterback, but can regress at any point. But I do appreciate the Jim Harbaugh thing in there. And hey, maybe we saw that from J.J. McCarthy today, where he sort of regressed because he keeps getting further and further coached by the quarterback whisperer, Jim Harbaugh.
Super chat from Cinnamonson06. What would Woody Hayes think of the current offense if he saw it for the first time?
Boy, that's an interesting. Like if he had just come out of like a cryogenic freeze and was watching
Or a real long trip with no cable
let's go cryogenic freeze. And
with Walt Disney's head.
Yeah, no, just a regular Woody Hayes head, cryogenic freeze, entire body intact, entire corpus. To wake up so the last game he sees is from the Clemson game or something like that, or his passing in 1987. So 35 years later, come to watch this and see all of this. That's an interesting question. He would probably be saying well, why don't they run it on 3rd and 9 for one? But also a lot of what you see out here now with these offenses, they did some of that back in the day because they had odd looks, and they have done some 5 wide stuff that he saw. But you see Ohio State doing it. That's not what it was for the nearly 30 years he was at Ohio State. But they did throw it some more once they got a quarterback like Art Schlichter who could. But I don't think he'd care for it.
What about the quarterback run or lack thereof with C.J. Stroud? Because we know Woody had his views about the forward pass and how there were more bad things that could happen.
Well, just imagine Woody, again, cryogenic freeze, all due respect, waking up and seeing a 3rd and 1 pass or a 4th and 1 pass. Or even maybe even worse, the shotgun quarterback sneak, the shotgun quarterback run on a 4th down. Yeah, boy, that would not go over well. But that would be fun to see. If there was some way to simulate that, some holograms, something like that. The game has changed, and it was changing while he was coaching it. And he tried a little bit to change, but it has changed for every single coach. It has changed since Urban Meyer was the coach at Ohio State.
Absolutely, NIL things there. But something else I think Woody would have a hard time with would be targeting.
Oh man, yeah, that Jack Tatum would have played one game. Well, he would have played in several games in his career, but he wouldn't have played in any second halves of his career. Yeah, boy, throwing out for that, for targeting. Maybe it's best that Woody didn't get to see what football has become. Although I'm guessing he wouldn't have minded having a bigger house. Although he was famous for not taking raises or whatever. What would he think of what the coaches are making? And they don't even have to teach a class to do it.
Well, he would absolutely want to teach a class. I mean, he really enjoyed that. Some sort of military strategery or anything things along those lines. Hanging out over at the ROTC building.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think he would be embarrassed and uncomfortable with the coaching salaries today. But, we're just saying, what would he say if he saw it? And we're not saying, that the job is there. But, how would he spread that money around? I don't know.
Oh, geez. Yeah. He would have scholarship funds, and he would have hospital funds. He would probably be still living in the same house,
right,
that he was living in, making $30,000 a year or whatever. But he would pay it forward. That's what he implored everybody else to do, pay it forward. That's exactly what he would have done.
Yeah, Yakov saying in Woody's last season he earned $48,000, which in today's dollars is like $2.3 billion. not quite, but I did see something. I don't know if it was necessarily equating back to Woody's era or whatnot, but just what the coaching dollars were and what they would be in today's dollars, significantly different. I wanted to comment really quick. I lost the comment. Somebody pointing out an Italian restaurant going back, I think, to Big Me Kickoff near me in Pickerington, Scally's. I've been there twice. I've liked it both times. My wife kind of didn't like it one time. The other time it was okay, but good suggestion. But Milano's in Reynoldsburg, try that one. I really am a big fan of that. And Milano's, if you're watching, Milano's Pregame Huddle, I'm just saying. But if you have a business too and you'd like to sponsor our pre or post game show, shoot us an email. Shoot me an email at kevin@buckeyegrove.com. We'll talk some terms.
Yeah, or PepsiCo or Yum Brand Foods. If you're out there and you want to throw us some advertising money.
The Taco Bell Mexican Pizza Pregame Huddle.
It's back. I mean, order on the app. Kevin, I've told you about the app. You don't do it. That is available on the app. Just that's a tip from me to you out there. Also, a nice Italian place out in Polaris called Olive Garden.
I was going to say, we have one of those near us too. It's technically in Reynoldsburg, but close enough to Pickerington. I'm just monitoring Tom's shot right now as he's outside the visitors gate waiting for the Wisconsin team arrival. We've been told any minute. So we'll kind of see there. So we can't run to one of our packages right now because I don't want to get caught in a package at the time that Tom's shot comes up.
Never wants your package caught.
Because then he'll yell at us and he'll try to beat me and he'll just embarrass himself. I mean, nobody wants any part of that. But I do think we see the buses pulling up. So let me add this shot to the stream. So there we go. We got it up. We have it up on a two shot right there. I'm not going to be able to recognize a lot of these players, but once again, it is an opportunity for us to take you around all of Ohio Stadium. Nobody else is able to do this right now. Just again, to show you that Janet's favorite team is in Columbus right now.
I gave my pick. We gave our staff picks. Tom and I did on our Buckeye Weekly preview show. I went 38-16. Tom went, I think, 42-17 or 42-20, something. 42-20, I think. What did? Oh no, you went. I went
38-17.
That's what Tom did as well.
A lot of the scores were very close. I mean, if we were playing like closest to the pin, it's like that. All right, I'm going to take this full and try not to remove our mic. So give me a.
And it's like, well, okay. I mean, that is true, but what does that really mean?
Right. Apparently, we did not have our mics open there, even though I had the mic open. So, it's one of these things that is just one of these odd factors of StreamYard. Thank you, StreamYard. But
you know what?
You missed gold. We really dropped our best comments right there.
That's too bad.
We can't go back. We're not in a time machine.
No.
But we'll just have to live with this in a 2. Because I would have to reverse the shots, all sorts of technical stuff right here.
Yeah. So who looked best to you walking in there, Kevin?
I think that Paul Chris probably looked the best. Yeah. I mean,
that guy can walk.
Oh, there's the police. I was hoping they were going to arrest Tom. I was really hoping.
That would be so good.
If they just sat there and said, "Sir, you're trespassing," and then they stuffed him and cuffed him. They cuffed him and stuffed him.
And then Tom again goes, "I am Tom Orr," and it's like cops like, "I don't care."
Well, we're going to drop him out of there because I think they're nearly done. So he's been cleared. So Shed, you can let him know he is clear at this point, so he can skedaddle over maybe to catch the Ohio State arrival. Don't know if you heard us at that point as we were talking over dead air, but. Very optimistic plan on his part. But you know what we need to do right now? I think we should, as Tom is getting over there, Tom in his fantastic behind the scenes series has done something on the Ohio State turf. So let's just get to that right now. All Tom, all the time, here on 95.5, The Eagle.
This episode of Behind the Scenes at Ohio Stadium is actually taking you to something that is not very, very behind the scenes at all. Something very in front of the scenes, something you see every Saturday, but something you probably haven't seen up close, and that is the field turf at Ohio State. at Ohio Stadium. They just replaced it this year in the summer of 2022. That was quite a process. They pulled up all the old turf, laid down a new level layer of kind of crushed up rock as sort of a base layer, and then put down a rubber mat over that. And then they started laying out the turf in 5-yard strips. They roll those out, stick them to the field, to the base layer underneath, and then they kind of roll something over it to really seal it all together. And then when they put the hash lines in for the different yard lines, when they put the numbers in, the big logo at midfield, those are all things that they cut out. They cut out the green turf, cut a little hole, and then put a separate white piece of turf in there. So if you've ever wondered how deep is this? Is this like long grass? Is this like the old artificial AstroTurf like the Brady Bunch's backyard? It's kind of in between. I'm going to give you a real up-close look here at what the field actually looks like. It's just little plastic grass. You can see it. You can't get your finger very far down in there. But what is in there? Little pellets. They're little rubber pellets. It's little pieces of recycled tire, chopped up tires that are in there. And if you spend any time down on the field, or if you're at practice and you're walking around the field at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, you will end up coming home with little rubber pellets in your shoes or inside your flip-flops, whatever you're wearing that day. So that's what the field is really like. It's kind of very, very short grass, maybe a little, longer than a putting green, but shorter than a fairway, probably on a golf course. This is that's what the field looks like. And just to give you a little sense of the goal line, got the green turf on the left, that's the regular field. The white line for the goal line. The red turf on the right-hand side for the end zone. Those are 3 separate pieces of turf. Those came in 3 separate pieces, and then they were kind of assembled here at the stadium by a crew over the course of a couple weeks over the summer. This turf is supposed to last about 7 to 8 years on average. You saw the turf at the end of the 2021 season was very, very sun-faded. Now it is bright red, bright scarlet. They got rid of the black in the end zone. It doesn't look like a Wisconsin end zone anymore. Got scarlet and gray and white on the field. And it seems like the early returns on this turf have been pretty good. The players seem to like it, not quite as slippery now that it's new turf and not all matted down. So hope you guys enjoyed that kind of up-close look. Not quite behind the scenes, very much in front of the scenes, but a place you guys probably don't get to go very often. So hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll see you next week.
And here we are, and let's add his shot, and he's there on aforementioned field right there, waiting for your Buckeyes to arrive.
Our mic's on right now.
I am seeing that our mics are on right now.
All right.
That is the feedback I am getting.
Because I don't want to waste the words that I'm going to be using here.
All right, hold on. I'm going to take him full, and we're going to see if we lose our mics or not. So keep talking. I'm trying to figure out.
I'm busy watching. I want to see if this works.
Solo layout.
There we go.
All right, we're good. All right, I've learned something today. You're supposed to learn something each day.
No, you're supposed to learn before you do it.
We're just flying by the seat of our pants here. Again,
no,
it's only Wisconsin,
right?
I mean, it's only New Mexico State. It's only whoever Michigan plays.
But it just shows some of the capabilities that we have, and so to get you down on the field there while that's a pretty cool shot, honestly.
That is a good looking shot right there. He's he is on the south end zone as he is facing the north end zone, the closed end of the shoe, if you will, even though the whole thing really is closed in at this point. So we managed to really time that out pretty well to be able to get from Tom's piece on the turf to get to Tom on the turf. And once we hear the music kind of start, we will know that there are players there, but we'll stay there on the full shot because once again, that is a very picturesque type of shot.
Yeah, but to be honest, the camera is doing most of the work on that shot. Like he just set the camera up.
Well, it is. I mean, it's the old KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. Any questions to talk about?
Yeah, let's look as we're keeping this shot up right now at this point. Let me get into the starred questions. done that. Trenton Bond, who is part of our great staff, says that Trevion Henderson needs to be more patient, and we certainly have talked about that. I mean, there's a little bit difference in a one-cut runner versus, somebody who's always trying to hit a home run.
Yeah, and Trevion is a little bit different than Mayan Williams and even Dallin Hayden in that he can stack moves on moves. And watching him, I think he's still learning. He's still figuring it out. And I talked to Luke Whippler about this before the season. He saw Trevion Henderson become a more patient runner in camp, and it is happening. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does against this defense, where you have to be patient, but you also, once you get to the line of scrimmage, as quickly as possible before these guys start hitting you. And him not playing much in the last game, got to watch a lot of it. I'm sure he has seen enough to be comfortable doing what he's doing. But from Mayan, it's just natural. It's that kind of style, and Dallin Hayden, that one cut, that kind of suits him as well. But it's funny that Trevion Henderson, who has all of these abilities, is still trying to figure things out while he is still averaging 6 yards a carry.
Ryan Stan saying Corum, as in Blake Corum from Michigan, ran for 243 today. WTF?
And he showed really, really good vision today, and he ran to some holes where there are no defenders, which always helps. And the problem with Blake Corum is he can have 243 yards against Maryland, but then he can also have 18 carries for 37 yards against somebody else. And he is a guy that has worn down. I wrote about him a little bit last week, where he's played 21 games. And he has more rushing yards in his 6 non-conference games than he did in his 15 Big Ten games that he's played in. Now, of course, he will have more yards total in the Big Ten play with this game. We'll put him over the 6 games of his non-conference. But that gives you an idea of how effective he is early, and then he gets less effective as the season goes on. So him doing this in September is no surprise. It's doing it in October and November. Because remember, they relied on Hassan Haskins over everybody else last year. And Blake Corum was there. They went with Hassan Haskins.
Mozart's Ghost jumps in and says Cade Stover is the secret weapon. I thought Sonny Styles was the secret weapon, but honestly, in terms of guys that are more game ready, it is Cade Stover. I mean, you just go back to the last game, and just some of those connections that CJ Stroud made with him were even more impressive watching him back on the DVR.
Yeah, now I'm wondering if Cade Stover becomes more of a target this week without Jackson Smith-Njigba, or if he becomes a more defendable player by the defense because they don't have to worry about Jackson Smith-Njigba. The middle of the field can be better defended, and that's where Cade Stover has been successful. So I wonder how much Jackson Smith-Njigba's absence will impact him. I think it can go either way. I do think that he'll be easier to defend, but also we saw him kind of double covered at times, and CJ still being able to put the ball in there, that just shows you it is the year of the tight end. When you're throwing into double coverage, it's still getting in there.
Yeah, there was one that was no, yes, and
But there was also another one that was no, and it was dropped interception. Same exact play.
Right. A couple of super chats that I missed at some point here. Omar Austin, also known as Hung Low on the Buckeye Huddle message boards. Cam Brown being out is a problem. Go Bucks from Hung Low Lant, a.k.a. Duval.
Is that a county in Florida or something?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's where a coach kicks a kicker.
Well,
you can't see Tony is just completely disgusted with me as we have Tom shot up.
We're not on camera.
So his facial expressions, I'm the only one seeing them right now.
No, but Cam Brown, and we've talked about it throughout the show. It's a significant loss because it moves everybody else up one. And now, as long as it's Denzel Burke and J.K. Johnson and they're healthy and they stay rested and winded or non-winded, I think they'll be okay. It's the fact that Denzel Burke missed some practice this week. You wonder, what is he, 85%? Is he at 100%? He's not a game-time decision. He's going to go. But it moves Jair Brown up one. He is now your number 3 corner, I assume, unless they make Cam Martinez the number 3 corner, which is a possibility. But either way, it's either a true freshman or somebody that doesn't normally play there as your number 3 guy. So you don't want to get to that point.
Another super chat from contributor to the Hue. He has been very active on the super chat. And that's how, unless I miss it, that's generally how you get to the top of the queue is by the super chat. So thank you, contributor to the Hue. Tom went 42-20. I say 45-17.
you know what? That's more power to you. A 28-point win, right? Is that the right math? 28 points on that one? You know, that would be emphatic. That would show a lot of people just how good this Ohio State offense and even the defense is to hold Wisconsin to, you know, a situation like that where, you know, maybe one of those touchdowns, it's 45-10 and you give them something late or something.
Right.
Like you beat Wisconsin 45-17. Nobody is questioning anything that has happened, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, and the thing is we talk about what's a great win, what's a good win, what's a win. I mean, there's just a lot of things that happen there, but you know, this is certainly a type of game that could be dominating and the score doesn't reflect it. It's like, you know, it's like, okay, this was a 10-point game, but it felt like a 30-point game, or you could have a 30-point game where there's just some garbage on the end and it really was a 10-point game.
Yeah, I mean, this game could end up 26-17, but it's where Wisconsin has been kept out of reach the entire time. It was never really in danger, something like that, where it's, you know, it's beautifully ugly, if you will.
We are now back on camera. I'm getting a little help from our post-game producer on punching this. I've got too many things going on, so thank you for that. Here we go.
Basically, you got fired. You're like, stop producing.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Nobody's ever going to complain about less work, right?
Well, yeah, you will.
No, it's no work. That's
it's less work, less pay.
Yeah.
That's a problem. But we do have another super chat, so let me just jump to that, Gavin. I will try to get back to your question. Out of the 6 games that I can flip to 5 of them were at commercial. Please fix college football broadcasting, Kevin. You're our only hope. Well,
you are the TV guy.
When you do start all these games at the same time, more or less, at least when you get to quarter breaks, you would assume that they might be somewhat close. But this isn't the case of where, you know, you have to hit like a hard term at the top of the hour or anything like that. There are a lot of things I'd like to fix when it comes to just everything.
Well, I think this is just a product of so many commercials that are in college football now. To make what used to be a 3-hour and 15-minute game into a 3-hour and 45-minute game, those 30 minutes have come from somewhere, and it's the commercials. And so, yeah, you've increased your chances of finding commercials at all 5 of your games. However, you also have 5 games that you could watch.
Right.
That has changed over the years. So I think you got to take the good with the bad, and to be able to watch any game you want, you can. You don't have to pay-per-view stuff. You don't have to spend $140 on an ESPN game plan type of thing, or just the game's not on TV, so you have to listen to it on radio because the NCAA won't allow Ohio State to be on more than 5 times or anything like that we had to deal with as younger people.
Back in my day, I used to have to walk uphill both ways
to watch a game.
To watch a game. Say that at this point. We've got that. All right. I will keep rolling on. Why are so many teams struggling in early games today? Penn State slept through Eastern Michigan, Georgia slept through Kent State, and a lot of other teams.
Well, Kent State, they've got a good quarterback. So, but yeah, I mean, they that should not happen. But also, I think a lot of this is for some teams, you're just getting ready for conference play, and so Penn State not wanting to deal with Central Michigan. And Georgia not wanting to deal with Kent State, like you're ready to get things going for real. And so, yeah, I don't think it's a huge surprise, but I think they both eventually ran away. And we've seen Ohio State do that as well, struggle early on. And sometimes they've even been trailing at halftime against some of these non-conference opponents, but eventually you kind of wake up and take over.
I mean, people want to sit there and say, oh, you're not taking your opponent seriously, or you're looking past them, but it is difficult. You're right. It is difficult to be able to get up for 12 games a week or 12 games in a regular season, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There is certainly some, physical wear and tear that goes on. Just sometimes it just ball doesn't bounce the right way. The music I am hearing sounds like, I think that the team may be showing up in a second. I was trying to look over the table and
Just
I couldn't quite see it.
Don't fall.
If I did, you would be entitled to all my baseball cards in my estate.
You got any good rookie cards?
Well, yeah, but around the time that all they did was just kept printing them over and over and over again, I got probably like 40 Roger Clemens cards.
I could trade you for some of my 84 Tops down Mattingly's.
There you go. All right, Tom says they're coming. Our producer has just punched it up, so a little bit of a different shot. He's done the shot from the ramp before. Now, as I said, he's in the south end zone over where, so the players will be coming at him. So we'll kind of wait as they get into focus. And then once we're done with that shot, we will also get to hear from our Ross Fulton, a great X's and O's piece before we call it an afternoon. But I want to remind you, as we're waiting for players to get into sight, what are you doing tonight after the game? I know you're going to be watching our post-game show. Be sure to join us. Tom and Justin Whitlatch will be there right off the bat at the beginning to give you some instant analysis of what they've seen. Justin will break down some X's and O's. Then we will go to the post-game locker room where you will get interviews from Ryan Day, CJ Stroud, and other players of the game. And then back to Tom, or to Tony and Justin, as Tom and I schlepp from the post-game room back here. And then we will have hour 2, which will be the Tom and Tony Spectacular. All of that after the game. So be sure to join us on the post-game show.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And again, that was me and Justin on the post game.
Yes.
Tom, nobody cares.
Well, it is what it is. Everybody was very excited. Our viewership number actually went up when I sat down for the show. So there might be a bell. Whenever Tim is all right, feed is being a little wonky again. I'm sure I'll get a nasty message in the private chat. One other time, I'm just saying that, we're going to have to figure something out, but unfortunately not in a position to be able to run everything on the hotspot, limited data. So Lily from AT&T, if you're watching, hit me up. We're seeing players come through. Again, just a different perspective right there. Tom's not right up in their grill, so we're not getting right on top of them. Here we go. Kevin saying boo that Jason's out. Absolutely. It is a loss, but I mean, I think that it's a situation of where I think that the Cam Brown absence is going to be a little bit of a bigger deal.
Yeah.
But at least Wisconsin is not a team known for its throwing. Don't look at what Wisconsin did against New Mexico State and say that this is normal. I mean, New Mexico State may be one of the worst teams in FBS.
Yeah, and JSN being out kind of alluded to this earlier, where the team has now played with him not on the field, so they know how to work with him out without him. But when he's out there, he just creates so much concern for the defense that Mecca can be less stressed. And Marvin Harrison, you see what happens. You see the results when he's out there. Even if the ball is not going to him, everybody else is open. And so now, how open are these guys getting without him? Because I assume it's going to be a Mecca in the slot, and then when it's not him, it'll be Xavier Johnson. And I think defenses know more about Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison, so that they're more concerned than maybe they were at the start of the season, and they know those guys are legitimate. They're both averaging over 100 yards receiving this year, but I don't know that they have the fear of those guys that they do of Jackson Smith and Jigba, and the fear that they actually do something defensively to defend him, whereas like the other guys, they'll just do what they do. They have to do something different for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and they don't have to necessarily. I don't know that they will do anything like that for anybody else. They might want to. They might realize we should have after the fact.
Super chat from Yakov 22. Kansas won the basketball title. Might also win a football title? Question mark.
Kansas is fun, man. They've got a fun offense to watch, and we had a great time watching them last. But Jalen Dan, right head coach, let's just see how long they can keep him.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing, because there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be looking his way. How do you stay at Kansas necessarily and say, I'm going to build this into something? I mean, you can go back to Glenn Mason, where, they were respectable. And then, he ends up going off to, the next job, and then Kansas goes into the tank.
Well, I mean, even Mark Mangino was able, he took him to number 2 in 2007, but then he eventually just petered out, which is what you do at Kansas, unless you get out of there.
I'm going to bring up the availability report because we have some people that seem to be unaware that JSN is out. So once again, our availability report, let me drop the super chat that we've addressed, if I can find it here. No game time decisions. In alphabetical order, your unavailable players: Omari Abor, Cam Babb, Cam Brown, Jordan Hancock, Mitchell Melton, Taraja Mitchell, Zach Prater, Evan Pryor, Joe Royer, and then the big one, Jackson Smith and Jigba. So there are your unavailable players for the game. And we know that the availability report is merely a suggestion.
Yes.
Merely a suggestion.
Right. It is not to be taken as science. It is to be taken as what the coaching staff wants us to know. And now Minnesota up 24-0 at Michigan State as PJ Fleck is locking up the Big Ten Coach of the Year award.
Absolutely. I mean, unless they give it to Kirk Ferentz for the 19th time, which is a little bit more of an inside joke for us.
Let's see what happens in that Minnesota-Iowa game.
Talking about just other games, let's jump into some X's and O's. And I know that one of my favorite parts of Buckeye Huddle, certainly this channel, but also BuckeyeHuddle.com, which everybody should be a member of, is the X's and O's breakdowns that we get. And Ross Fulton provides so much great context to what it is that we see, what we're looking to see after the game, what we've seen. Let's jump out to Ross Fulton's update for this game.
Wisconsin poses a host of interesting scheme issues on both sides of the ball. So starting with the Wisconsin defense and Jim Leonard, who has been one of the top defensive coordinators in the country since he began at Wisconsin, and Wisconsin's had one of the best defense in the country. They've been probably inside of the top 5 of SP plus every year he's been there. So, Wisconsin, their base concept is a 3-down tight front. But they'll also use a 2-4-5, which Jim Leonard calls a peso look, against spread sets. And so, the first question is how much do they play the tight front versus playing a 2-4-5? Obviously, the tight front is very stout against the run, limits their ability in space. And you have to go back to 2019. In the first matchup in 2019, Wisconsin played a lot of the tight front that Ohio State exploited. And so they played more 2-4-5 in the Big Ten championship game. And, similar to how Michigan played 2-4-5 a lot last year, and I'd expect to see that. Again, they're very difficult to run inside on, though. Ohio State in the past has had a lot of success running wides under the boundary against them, and then taking advantage of they will leave their corners and man or pattern match coverage. They'll play a lot of cover 1, cover 3, some cover 4. And so, hit those underneath routes on the outside, and then that has opened opportunities in the past for Ohio State against Wisconsin safeties getting nosy against the run off play action. And so, one example in the Big Ten championship game in 2019, they did the shallow and up to Chris Olave, which they just used the other week to Mecca Buka. So things of that nature. For the Wisconsin offense, again, it obviously will get our first look at how Jim Knowles handles a traditional pro style looks. Notre Dame is somewhat of a hint, even though they're in the shotgun. There's a lot of 12 personnel and multiple tight end sets. And so, again, the question becomes, does he stick with his base 4-2-5 personnel? Does he bring in a bigger body? We saw 1 3rd and 2 against Notre Dame. Knowles replaced Tanner McAllister with Josh Proctor. So you had the 3 safeties being Ronnie Hickman, Latham Ranson, and Josh Proctor. And so maybe he goes to those 3. But as we've seen in previous weeks, he's been happy to bring Ronnie Hickman and or Latham Ranson down in the box as to function as additional linebackers. And so he's been able to get away thus far with just base personnel. And then, the other thing to look for, Wisconsin, base run play is counter Trey, counter OH, whatever you want to call it. And so, Knowles in the past, and we saw it again against Toledo, really likes using the jack to mug up or cover up that guard and follow the puller and really mess with gap run plays. And so I would look for a lot of jack, a lot of odd fronts messing with Wisconsin's offensive line in terms of understanding who to block. And so, I think that it probably may be a lower scoring game than some people expect, even if Ohio State's offense is playing really well, just because of the quality of Wisconsin's defense. But I think that given Knowles' track record, I think Wisconsin's going to have some difficulty running the football as well.
On the screen.
We're just, as we popped up, you saw us, we're watching the Michigan State-Minnesota game, and yeah, Michigan State is not doing so well. But before we get into that, we have a super chat from Jason. No Cam Brown Day. Never mentioned it during the week. Thanks for nothing. What am I supposed to tell my kids?
You know what? That's true. Ryan Day, while he is so focused on his football team, he does not think about other parents and their children and how they are supposed to explain absences to those children. And you bring up a very good point, and it's something that maybe a letter, an email,
Strongly worded.
And you know what? I would CC Gene Smith on that email and say, hey, I've got kids. What am I supposed to tell them when somebody just suddenly shows up injured? Like, yeah, that's a great question, and I feel for you. I hope your kids are able to watch the game, unless they're too brokenhearted, destroyed, traumatized. Well, it's just a tough situation. But that's, football is a violent game, and parenting can be a tough thing. So Godspeed to you.
As we close in, we're here at the top of the 6 o'clock hour and near the end of the show. Bill Evans, 205 watching, and actually it's up to 219 on my screen. Only 56 likes. Step right up, folks. Come on. Hit that thumbs up. Give you 3 seconds to do it. 3, 2, 1. Hit that thumbs up.
There's nothing like guilt and peer pressure.
Exactly. And the worst part is I don't see the thumbs up on my monitor, so I don't know where we're at. So we may have lost 2 or 3 with my demands, but hopefully they went up.
We do appreciate just a reminder, and also the clicks on the thumbs and the notifications and all of that, and the subscribers. Without you guys, we'd just be talking to ourselves and shed in the background.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to do either of those things.
I talk to you enough.
I mean, exactly. I mean, before Tony and I worked together, I think we texted a lot. Now it's just like, what do you want? What do you want? So that brings us a perfect segue to our close. What do you want to see tonight out of Ohio State?
Out of Ohio State, a pass rush would be good because, as I talked about earlier in the show, I think Wisconsin's passing game allows for some pass rush with the play action that they will do. It's not necessarily a quick strike passing game, so I want to see them get after the quarterback. But really, it's going to come down to how do they handle the run. And that's where I'm wondering how Jim Knowles does with his defense, how he attacks this Wisconsin running game, because we've said all along, how are you going to defend a Wisconsin running game with 5 defensive backs? And I feel like he's going to want to show us and see after the game and say, this is how. You saw it. That's what I was going to do, and I did it.
Exactly. Steve is calling me out for not saying that I've not explained the legend of Todd. We'll have to do it on another show when he's not sitting right here. But what I want to see, does Ohio State attack this defense? Do they run to throw the ball? Do they throw to run the ball? And if one aspect is not working, obviously you don't abandon something quickly, but how quickly do they make an adjustment? Go back to the Notre Dame game, running the ball. Even early in the game, they were getting 6-7 yards a pop, and then they kind of got away from it. Yeah. How does that work here? We know that Wisconsin is down a little bit in its secondary. Does that give them the opportunity to throw it to set up the run? But if the throws aren't there, are they going to be ready to pound the rock with Trevion and with Mayan?
Yeah, and if they can run it, then that opens up the play action, and now you're fine again. Your passing game will open up again if you can run it.
One more time, too. I just want to make sure, hit that thumbs up for us. 3, 2, 1, hit that thumbs up. But I also want to invite everybody to the postgame show. Don't miss out on the postgame show. Best postgame show out there for covering Ohio State. You'll get all the postgame insights. Ryan Day, CJ Stroud, Tom, Tony, myself, everything. So don't miss out on that. And Buckeye Huddle, fantastic website. You can see all of that down here in the bottom in the scroll. Give us a look there. Especially, you don't want to miss out being part of one of our game day threads. They're fantastic. They're fun to go back and read after the fact. If Wisconsin goes up 7-0 in this game, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be upset. Going back with the hindsight of knowing what happened in the game is great. But, that's not the only reason to sign up, just one of many reasons.
Yeah, and a ton of recruiting updates coming out of this game over the next couple of days that you'll want to check out as well. at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Please become a member and find us there.
And if you become a member, I will tell you the legend of Todd. It's almost like William Wallace. It's almost like William Wallace. He did set Tom free.
And with that, Kevin,
I think it's a show.
all right. Thank you all for joining us as always. Thank you for being with us for almost, I don't know,
An hour
and a half.
50.
Yeah. Wow. Felt like about an hour, really. So we're moving pretty quickly there. So thank you all for joining us. And as Kevin said, check us out in the post game. We will see you then. Thanks, and have a great game.